This is part 2 of Commission Courtesy. If you haven't already, check out part 1. Otherwise, we'll jump straight into it. I do know there's certain things you have to take into consideration when you're thinking of like printing onto a t-shirt as far as colours, like not just size, where if you produce art in a certain way, it can look bad when it's printed. Mm. Correct me if I'm wrong, because online is RGB, whereas on t-shirts is, was it CMYK?
Yeah, CMYK. So if you're, say, looking at your monitor today and you're watching this podcast, all those colours you're seeing on a screen, on TVs, in video games, on any form of screen type display device is displayed in what's called RGB, which is red, green, blue. If you guys want to Google it, I can probably find a link and we can pop it in for the chat later. That's a part of a colour spectrum. So when you add those colours together, if you add all of those colours together, technically you're going to get white. If you then change up those ratios of colour, you'll get different colours. With CMYK, which is what your printer will use in anything that is generally printed on something, so it might be a print on a t-shirt, it might be a print on a cardboard box or your mail, that uses CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and I can never remember what the K stands for, but essentially it's black. So those things, your printer will add those colours together, but because it's got black as an element in there, one of the colours, you can make things, it's sort of not quite the reverse, it's just a limited range. So you have less colour options. So you're having less of this same piece of cake or pie that your colour spectrum comes from for RGB, but it's a portion of that. So it's not as vibrant in most cases, and the colour choices are a little less. And then if we're going to get down this rabbit hole, different countries use different, what they call colour profiles. So there might be CMYK in the US, but they use a different one, which is called US Swap 2, or there's a few other ones, and different parts of the world use different ones. In Australia, predominantly we use coded Fulgura 39, and it has another name that's a lot of numbers, but essentially different printers use different things, and so it kind of gets a bit weebly.
So even, again, depending where in the world you're getting that merch made makes a difference as well.
But I think...
So, yeah, this is very important that you communicate that with your artists.
But I think with, say, Streamlabs and I think Stream Elements, from what I've looked at in my own personal research, I think they will allow you to upload an RGB image and they will do the colour conversion to their printers, which is lovely. It actually is one less step to do. But not all printers will do that, and not all printers will be clear on which colour profile they want to use. So for me, it's one thing that I've found during digital art that is a challenge. I'm gradually getting better at dealing with it. I've just started generally designing. If I know it's a logo, I will assume that they're going to possibly put on a business card or a merch, because that's what I do with that. So the price is sort of going to gradually start reflecting that. During COVID, I didn't put my prices up at all, just because everyone was tight on funds, and I thought that just wasn't the appropriate time. But I've assumed if you're going to ask me to do a logo, that you're going to put it on something. It's just, so I will design in CMYK, which might mean we start off with a limited range of colours, but I feel like when it means you're going to print it, you'll have a better chance of that being compatible. So looking good on screen, but then still looking good on print. And it's not everyone's way of going about doing a logo, but that's the way I've managed to deal with limited colour palettes.
Moving forward, on to the last question we've got here. This is one I've actually been thinking about for a while, and I don't know how much you may know about it. I've seen there's a lot of streamers who have material from games especially, but also other pop culture in their emotes, in their stream assets, or on-screen stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you ever think that companies may, because Nintendo is very notorious for doing DMCA takedowns for any of their videos on YouTube back in the day. I think they've lessened up now, but do you ever think companies may start either going after streamers or artists who have copyrighted characters and materials on their streams?
I would say it's entirely possible. I mean, if you look at the DMCA notion altogether, essentially a lot of part of it right now is applying to music because of the fact that when you're buying a piece of music, you're buying the right to listen to it at home. With film and with images from video games, there is an element where they don't mind a bit of fan-based art because it's, fans showing their appreciation for elements of films such as, something in Studio Ghibli with like Totoro or, Howl's Moving Castle, that kind of thing. And then, all the Star Wars and Star Trek stuff. But there's an element where I think it's a grey zone because, you have conventions where they have cosplay competitions where people cosplay as certain characters and sell art that they've inspired by elements. I wouldn't say, it's hard to say they would or it's hard to say they wouldn't. Like it's, because this whole notion of fan art has gone on for such a long time, I mean, is it possible that once they've done more of this DMCA stuff and, got on music and film, they may eventually sort of move on to art and graphics. Yep. But, I mean, how long's a piece of string?
Yeah, that's true. But I guess my other, like a follow-up question for that is, if a content creator approached you for, say, emotes that featured Mickey Mouse, how confident would you be in recreating it?
I probably wouldn't, and that's largely because it's not my art. It's already been there. I respect that, there's Walt Disney's and the Disney Corporation is quite a big company. I would respectfully not do it. We could probably do something similar, but I wouldn't necessarily go that path. The closest I've gotten to something specific in terms of referencing a film or a movie was when I did a commission that involved doing a heart-shaped emote that was with similar colours and references to, I'm not sure if your audience would be familiar with it, Herbie the Love Bug. So I used a bit of colouring from that. But again, yeah, it's entirely possible they could do some sort of emote filter. I mean, they already do on Twitch an emote filter for certain reference points or names of, you can't call it this, or if it's got if it's the whole thing with butts essentially, the thirsty type emotes. So I mean, there are sort of content filters out there. Whether they start going, hey, we want you to do this, it's a big unknown with the way DMCA's gone with music and things and intellectual property. I would probably say if you're looking at getting emotes done, make it original, make it centric to you. If you wanted to say go for a Mickey Mouse emote or Mickey Mouse inspired emote, what does that reference back to your stream? Like, where does that fit? And how does that fit?
That is actually a very valid way of looking at it too.
Because I guess my other point is, if you're getting an emote made and you want it to be linked with your channel and your channel identity, why would you want to use something else? Why would you not pick something that's relevant to you? Because your audience needs to relate to you as the creator. That how does relating to a specific movie element or character relate back to you as the streamer? That's my food for thought for that.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you have anything else you'd like to bring up?
I think we've tackled all the questions. I mean, we could talk about the DMCA stuff a bit more if you wanted to. I mean, that is a interesting realm of discussion. To an extent, I actually understand. I can relate to why the DMCA stuff happens with the music particularly. Again, it's the same thing with art we talked about, which is the notion of that you've licensed it for one thing, but you're using it for another. And, there are lots of music services out there that you can access that will allow you to listen to their music on your content platforms. The one thing I'm discovering is that there is more than just one or two. Like I've been a staunch user of Pretzel for years. But I've discovered since having a second channel for non-art related stuff and just for fun that at the moment with the new version I may need to look into something else for music because I'm only using the one PC at this current time for streaming and it's not recognising my second account. So, but I'm learning that there's lots of music choices out there that are stream safe, and the main thing about DMCA is that, if everyone does the right thing, streams won't get muted or there won't be takedowns of content. It's about not going, but I've got Spotify, I can just pop Spotify on. There's this thing called terms and conditions that most of us don't read. I for one, have clicked past terms and conditions because their pages have been too long and the language is too wordy. The gist of it is that if you're subscribing to a music service, you're subscribing to it for personal use. And that's the thing. Personal use does not mean I'm personally going to stream from that music service onto my stream that I'm making money for on Twitch. because people can have expensive hobbies. That's still, in the grand scheme of things, considered as you trying to make a profit from music that you've bought on a streaming service or renting via a streaming service. It's a personal license.
The way to look at it, I had to explain this to someone recently with movies, actually, was that you've got this license for personal use, which applies to you. But if you then rebroadcast it on Twitch or whatnot, you're now basically taking the role of a TV station who would buy a license to rebroadcast that.
Oh, exactly.
They aren't just buying the same copy we are off the shelf.
No, and the other way, I was thinking about it as well, because I thought we were going to be talking about DMCA part of art and things. It's like if you went to a bakery and went, I like this cake, I'll buy this cake, and then not telling the bakery that you're buying this piece of cake and then selling it slice by slice in your cafe. You can't do that, obviously, because the bakery will get upset at you, and in real life that could land you in some serious legal trouble. In the same way that if you persisted with this in terms of DMCA stuff, you could effectively lose your channel if you get too many channel strikes against you. You don't want that, because that means you no longer have the ability to interact with your community that you spent time building. So
yeah, it's actually, and the whole reason why I sort of brought this up with the art side of things is because, like, when it comes to music, a lot of people understand because it's been, for example, in YouTube, a talking point for the better part of a decade. But when art is involved, I was amazed when I came to Twitch to see how many people had, for example, like Pokemon as their emotes. And especially, again, like my background is YouTube originally. Nintendo was a big no-no, because as soon as you started putting Nintendo stuff on your channel, they'd come in DMCA and you just end up getting strikes against your channels. So when I came to Twitch, when I started on Twitch, people were streaming copyrighted music, and then they would have like Pokemon emotes, and my mind was blown because I couldn't believe this. I was like, what's happening here? Is this the wild, wild west of the internet? And then, of course, since then, companies have started the DMCA for music and that on Twitch. So even then, I'm still sitting back thinking Nintendo got quite upset with YouTube creators putting their content online. I wonder if they'll ever get annoyed because people are using it for, you know, all sorts of merch and that.
There's this fine line I learned about in art school, which is appropriation. So if you're making an artwork and say it's inspired by, okay, so for example, the Mona Lisa, that's been appropriated and changed. So there's this line of appropriation where as long as you're changing a certain percentage of the artwork or doing it in a certain way, at least in traditional art sense, there's an understanding that the appropriation to a certain extent is okay, as long as you're not outright just reprinting the Mona Lisa and slapping your name on it. But, I mean, like I said, there's still that realm of fan art that a lot of game companies like, because it's fans' ways of making their content love known. So I'm not sure if they will go down that DMCA path yet. I do think if, you know, push come to shove, they might think about it or put limitations on how you can do it. Interpreting an artwork and turning into something, like, I will fess up, I have made Pokeball style badges for a friend, but I literally drew them myself, and that was very difficult because I was like, how do I do this at a tiny resolution of subscriber badges, or even smaller than emotes? And that's, you know, but again, it was an interpretation of the thing. They would definitely, I wouldn't call them Pokeballs. I would say they're Pokeball inspired, but they just, you know, but if push came to shove and, you know, Nintendo turned around and said, oh, that person can't have that anymore, then yeah, I'd remake it. But again, I made those, like you said, there's a wild west of streaming and what's okay. As an artist, I'm still learning the, you know, finer points of what Twitch will and won't allow. And like all of us, we're all learning, because there's no, when you sign up to Twitch about streaming and creating stuff, there's not really a lot of guides out there. There's a lot of, you know, so-and-so knows about this or that, or I heard this information from Joe down the street, or there's a lot of sharing within peer-to-peer sharing, but platform to platform, there's not really a lot of guides about this is what is acceptable, this is what DMCA is. I didn't know about DMCA until I had one of my first streams muted, because I was using Spotify way back when, and I was like, why is my stream muted? And yeah, sure enough, that's when I discovered I needed to start using things like Pt2 or No Copyright Sounds or one of the other services. There's a lot of learning that happens on the fly. And like you said, it's a wild west out there. Another way of looking at it, streaming services, to them, we are just a username because we make them money. We make money off the service, but we're just signing up to use their service as a platform. In the same way that you're signing up to, say, use Twitter or Instagram to put content on there. It's a platform, you're using it. Each of those places has different rules. And unfortunately, they chuck a lot of those rules in the really wordy terms and conditions, which we all click past because we just do.
The best way I've ever heard terms and conditions summarised was by, I think it's John Oliver on Last Week Tonight. He said that they could hide an entire copy of Mein Kampf in terms and conditions for Apple's user, and you just agree to it not knowing it's in there because you know you're not going to read it.
No, because the wording is very much legal jargon and wordy, and they know that they could sneak something in there and you've clicked to it. So like with Instagram, I think it is that you have a right to put images on there provided they fit the criteria, but Instagram still has the right, if they want to use those images. Like a lot of those social media platforms have that little fine bit in there. So that's in there and you know it's in there, but at the same time, they know that you need to use this platform to interact with other people. They know that you're going to use their platform regardless. So they'll still get in there. You'll sign up to it because your friends are on a social media platform and you want to interact with them because you want to not miss out on anything cool. But it's about being aware of that. If you're using music or you're using an artwork, that you have the right to actually use that. And that's the bit that people don't think about. Like you said, with music, people are becoming instantly more aware about the DMCA notion of think they could lose their content. But art's never been really considered in the same realm of things as film or music. And that's largely because film and musicians have big companies looking after their creators and the higher dollar value producing entities of the art world. Artists are generally not in a union or organisation that's looking after them in general. So it is very much everyone's running their own gig. So everyone's
a lot of independence.
They're independent, which is great in a way because we can do what we want to an extent, but at the same time, you don't have that collective safety net. The whole notion of safety in numbers doesn't quite work out the same. Particularly, say, if we're going to look at things like what's happened with COVID with the creative sector, like musicians and film industry, more likely at this stage to get support than individual artists because the financial thing is that those will put bums on seats in a venue, and bums on seats in a venue mean bums on seats will spend money on food or drink and theoretically create more of an economic impact. Gets back to the money thing.
Flow-on effect.
Capitalism. To be blunt, it's capitalism.
Capitalism.
You see art being priced in different ways, and sometimes you go, why is that art priced that way? And largely it's a reputation thing. Largely it might have been a materials and a time thing. But at the end of the day, a chunk of that money is going to be covered to expenses or tax. Realistically, the overheads are ridiculous when it comes to making art or selling art in a gallery. And that's why I don't. I also don't do well in crowds. But it gets back to that notion of know what you're allowed to do on a platform, know what your rights are as the person using the platform, but also make sure that you're doing the right thing. Yeah, it's the doing the right thing while you're on a streaming service means your content's going to stay there, your community's going to grow, and your content's not going to get muted or destroyed because of DMCA.
And something you said earlier I quite like was treating each other with care.
That's very important. So if you say find an artist that you like, but you can't afford their work, do the right thing and just either say, hey, can I do a payment plan, or can we table this commission for another time? I like your work, but it's just not something I can do right now. And those sort of things are okay. Either telling them that they're too expensive, or ghosting them, or not responding if they're trying to reach out to you because they're trying to work out whether you want commission or not. Because remember, artists are generally taking a list of people that they can do the work for. And so if you're unsure what you can do, communicate that with them, because if you're not going to go through that work, that means they can take someone else's work on, and you're helping them survive at the end of the day. It's just courtesy. Likewise, if you think their artwork is, on the flip side, too cheap, but you love their work anyway, don't grump at them and tell them they need to increase their pricing. They may, like you said, be doing it for a hobby. They may be feeling that that price point for what their skill set is sits well for them. And chances are they may have like a crowdfunding platform, like a Ko-Fi or a Patreon, or if they've got a donation contribution sort of link in their Twitch channel, just chuck them some dollars that way. That's a really nice surprise to do to an artist. If you're feeling like they're, because in Australia we don't do tips. It's just not our way. We just, you can tip people, but
with that being said though, like we don't do tips as a general rule, but when I got my emotes done, I was very happy both with the emotes and with the artist, because I can't remember, I commissioned 5 emotes, I believe it was. So they charged me X amount of dollars. I wanted one extra emote. 5 emotes. One of them I wasn't sure about. Like I said to you, I did up sort of a brief for all the rest of them. I said, could you throw me some ideas? They sent through 6 sketches, 2 of which I liked. So I got one extra emote made. And at the end of the day, when it was all done and dusted, I was so happy with their communication, with how quickly they did everything, both like getting back to me with the sketches and everything else. I actually paid for, I gave them a tip that was equivalent of an extra emote because I was so happy with their work. So.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, for me, with my invoicing, I don't have tips enabled, but that's just largely because I feel awkward taking tips. Having said that, I have a few clients where they've gone, we like your work, and then all of a sudden they've paid, and then all of a sudden I might get a notification on Ko-Fi or Streamlabs, or them going, hey, we tipped you a bit more money. It's like, what was that for? And it does, it still surprises me to this day when anyone ever donates to my Ko-Fi or when I was using Streamlabs for my streaming. Tipping an artist, is a pretty special thing for the artist. I mean, a lot of us just don't expect it. And so when you do it, it's quite surprising. But having said that, the best way you can support an artist if you love their work is if you see them post something, comment, tweet it, like it, share that original link to that content, because that does a lot in terms it gets back to that traditional word of mouth notion, but in a modern social media sense, those sort of interactions are huge, because you're saying to the artist, I like your work enough that I'm going to share a link to your content with my audience, and you don't know the volume of the audience that they're sharing it with. And so it's this whole thing, if they've decided to share your work onwards in a way that they can. And for me, whenever I get a like or a retweet, I get a little bit of a buzz because it's the case of, wow, if they like my work and they've retweeted it to their audience, or they've, shouted me out. When I get a recommendation on Twitter, it's something that I'm still not used to. And that's just me being me. But it's always quite a humbling and wonderful experience to do that for an artist. So for me, that's the best way. If you can't afford a commission to an artist, but you love their work anyway, just interact with their content. You don't have an understanding of how big an ideal that makes to someone when you do that. It's that's the biggest thing you can do.
Well, at that, we might pull things to a close.
Thank you for having me.
Not a worry at all. Thank you for being here. Now, just want to say again, so you're Little Arty on most platforms, like Twitch. I'll include all of your links in the description of the episodes as well, just if anyone wants to find your Ko-fi page or your website. Yeah,
so on my website, I also have a contact form. I also have links to my other, where I am also findable on the internet. So that helps people. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram as Little Arty Studio. On Twitter, I'm just Little Arty, but that's, I think, what I'm mostly known around the Adelaide community is just Arty. I really appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you today, and would love to have another chat at some point soon, depending on what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, certainly. And that actually brings you to anybody out there listening. You can submit any questions or topics through to bbmpodcast@bigbrainmedia.org. If you'd like to hear more from Arty and hear more about the art world, if you've got any questions, let us know.
Right. Bye.
See ya.